Crafting a lifestyle can be tough to figure out by yourself. Despite our best efforts, we can only achieve so much on our own. Even the best athletes need someone else to help them reach the highest level. Having a mentor or coach provides us the guidance and motivation to reach our fullest potential. They can push us farther than we think possible. A coach not only refines our training, but helps us identify the shortcomings that we have a hard time seeing. A coach is a vital key to the process of achieving the extraordinary. Carolyn Owens coaches others to reach their full potential. From federal and armed forces employees to the private sector and nonprofits, Carolyn provides guidance on everything from professional development to relationship counseling. She provides a path for growth for disabled veterans and counsels those suffering with a long-term diagnosis. Everyone can benefit from coaching, and Carolyn has proven that in just about every arena imaginable. Now focused on her latest book and growing her reach to a wider audience, Carolyn is sharing her coaching methods with those who need it most. With the heart of a teacher, this single mom has raised a bright young man and raised the bar on professional coaching. Helping her clients to realize their dreams and reach for the stars, check out Infinity Coaching with Carolyn Owens.
I went back to the books that as a child influenced me and how it kind of, I was like, oh my God, that's the topic. I could write a bunch of articles about this.
Food for thought or fodder for the next blog post.
It made me sad for a moment.
Why is that?
What I ended up writing down was, I haven't made time to read or write, nor do I have the right environment to do so. I have to create that. Until I do, a little piece of me is missing. And I was like, I went to Shakespeare, okay? I went to Ernest Hemingway, okay?
Nice.
I was like, I learned so much growing up reading.
We all kind of have that first book that kind of sparks the desire to read. What was that first book for you?
You're going to laugh. It's a book about a bear, and it's called Corduroy, right?
Oh, I know Corduroy.
Okay, I have a stuffed corduroy now.
Nice.
And my son laughed at me. I said, son, when I found him, I was like, you do not understand that this was one of my all-time favorite books growing up. And I have it. I have my first copy of Romeo and Juliet.
Wow.
The pages are fallen out and withered. I've lost pages when I've moved, but I still have that one. The Incredible Journey, Deaf and Dying, I had to read in college. But that was the first time that I had to challenge the theory of the existence of God.
Oh, so you started
The
going
paper
deep.
I wrote, I was in, it's where I was in life, and reading that paper that I wrote is very difficult because she said this was sad. It was a sad paper. And I was like, oh man, but that was based on the book Deaf and Dying. And I could almost tell you chapter for chapter that book. But with my son, it's Love You Forever. Have you ever read that book?
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's about the journey of a mother and son.
Ah, beautiful.
From birth to when the mother gets old and he's holding her.
Isn't it amazing how there's certain books like that just come into our life like right at the perfect time? It's like there were two of those exactly like that for you.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's not necessarily always like roses and flowers. Sometimes it's because you're in a dark place and you need some dark reading and you need some whatever that connects with you at that particular moment in your life, man. That's so, I just love reading and it's been so much fun to get back into that. Let me ask you this. Who was the person that planted that seed of reading in you?
Nobody really.
It was just you?
I loved books, and I have had over 1,000 books. That was the weight of when I moved in the military.
Yeah, it's all the heavy lifting.
But we could deduct professional books from the weight because we had a weight limit based on our rank. And so they let us deduct professional books. And they were like, ma'am, do you understand how much your weight is in books? And there's too many. The sad part is I know I can't keep them all. And I
They
need that.
changed the policy after Carolyn retired.
There was that many books. That would be a problem moving now.
Well, what I've started doing is trying to give them away. I'm just
And
like,
that's
as
what I
soon as
need to.
yeah.
But it's hard.
Well, the thing that I got into is I started marking them up too. Now, once I started marking them up, then okay, that's my little personal copy. I don't want to give up, like that's my little, that's notes for the next book. That's what I've really started doing, trying to learn the writing process is now starting to take notes and having to go back to refer to these books. I've been doing this Facebook Live on the 4DX principles. Great book, and I had read it like 3 or 4 years ago. And, and my dad actually teaches the principle, so I feel pretty confident, but I hadn't revisited it for a long time. So when I went and did my Facebook Live posting yesterday.
Oh, you did. You're doing it.
I'm just trying to just, kind of highlight it, just kind of give the 10,000 foot view. Obviously, it's a very detailed process to get involved with, but I butchered it. It was terrible, man. I hadn't gone back and refreshed my memory on it. And I did a horrible job. And then so I felt so bad about it. I went back and pulled the book and started refreshing for concept number 2 I've got to do today. And man, yeah, I was like, wow, there's just a lot of good content I need to go back to refresh to get included into the stuff I'm working on for that 8 Keys to Great. But yeah, there's so much good content in there for sure.
But you're building the audience for when it's time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, you want to jump right into this thing? We'll get rocking and rolling.
Okay.
What made you want to get into coaching? What pushed you in that direction?
Because I liked working with people. I didn't know any coaches. No. I didn't even know it was a career until somebody else.
Well, I know somebody had positive influences on your life. You can't tell me they didn't. You didn't get this far without it.
God, I mean.
Well, there you go. That's one. Jesus counts too.
He had his hand on me.
All right. So this is the Extraordinary Podcast, and my guest today is Carolyn Owens.
Hi, Nate.
Thank you for taking the time to join me on the show today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Where are you?
As far as where am I located?
Yeah.
So I am in what we call the DMV area. That's the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. That is where I reside. However, home will always be Philly. I love all things Philly, and that's Philly, PA, not Mississippi.
We'll try not to hold that against you.
Hey.
Coming from Atlanta, we have that sports rivalry thing going pretty well.
Fly, Eagles, fly.
Unfortunately, we're usually the ones getting the worst end of that stick. So, yeah, we'll just stick with all the good stuff and all the positive things going on. We won't even delve into any of that stuff because I don't want to get depressed. But anyway.
No, because I am diehard Philly fan.
Yes, for sure. You've got a storied history. You got a lot of stuff going on. Take me back to the beginning, how it all got started for you.
So I graduated from high school pretty early. I was pretty young when I graduated. And then I went into Temple. I attended Temple University, ROTC at University of Penn, graduated from there with a commission in the Navy. So I served 24 years as a Navy officer. And when I retired, I realized what I liked most about being in the military was working with people. I worked primarily in human resources. I retired as a director of human capital management command. And one of the things that I really, really liked was working with people. And I realized that was something I could do as a coach. I could continue those skills. I could continue some of the training I did. I taught at the Army War College for 3 years, and I loved teaching there. I learned so much teaching there, as well as the experience of it all. I love that seminar environment and being able to engage in conversations that, were pretty meaningful about our country, our culture, society. And being able to do that, I do some training now, I do the coaching now, I do writing, and I have my podcast as well. But that was the stuff I wanted to continue, those pieces. And I found out you could do that as a coach, as a trainer. And so it's a very easy transition for me from, the military to that. Everybody encourages you to take a break in between, but I pretty much hopped right in and started, my business and getting everything going within, a couple of weeks after retiring.
Well, and it's interesting too, because a lot of your coaching is in the military arena. It's still in the government sector. So you're still knee deep with a lot of the same folks you were working with originally.
I am, very blessed and honored to be able to continue working with a lot of people that work for the federal government or in nonprofit organizations as well. That's a lot of where my work is. And so I have that background with the federal government and being able to understand how those environments and cultures work. It helps me kind of stay in touch with all of that as well.
Unless you've been in that environment for an extended period of time, it's really hard to understand the logistics and the nomenclature behind the military and the government and how all those things work and that bureaucracy and all the cogs and the wheels. I mean, it's so involved. It can be, for someone on the outside looking in, it can be pretty overwhelming and intimidating. So tell me about your first experience in the classroom, your first experience teaching. What was that like?
If you go way, way back, and I'm talking way back, and I was like in elementary school, I actually would go to a school. My mom worked as a assistant in a classroom. And I would actually go to the classroom at times and do these reading assignments with the kids. That was probably my first experience of really being, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I literally prepare ahead of time. What stories are we going to talk about? And I loved it. It was fun. So if you were to say first experience, that's probably where it actually started, where I would go do that. And I can still see it to this day and remember it, how clear it was. And hindsight, fast forward years later, that's part of what I do when I do my group coaching. I'm preparing. We like to talk about various books about leadership skills and different things. And I will actually do some of the same things, of course, at a higher level that I did then to prepare and find the great books that we can study and the research. And it's like, so that kind of is the first time, really.
I love that. That's so cool. Because one of the things that I do with folks, or I try to talk to people about, is identifying that thing early on in life that you just kind of connected with. For one of my daughters, she's this little producer. She's always producing these little shows, and she'll write out tonight at 5:00, join us for a talent show, and this, and like the actors and all these things or whatever. So like, it's so clear and obvious to me, like the path life will take her down. Because of what she likes. And like, so for me, it was swinging a hammer. I was always building skateboard ramps and stuff as a little kid, pilfering old lumber out of the construction sites and things like that. And of course, 20 years later, I'm building houses. So it's so neat when we can see something like that and identify it in our early childhood and then make a life out of that. That's when you're on the right track, man. That's when you're on that right lifestyle path,
I used to also I wrote as a kid. I still have poems that I wrote when I was 9, 10 years old. I still have my little poetry books I'd put together and the stories I would write. And some of them were actually pretty good. I look back and I read them to somebody and they're like, oh, wow, who's the author? Who wrote that? And I'm like, oh, I wrote that when I was 10. He said, no, it's hard to believe that that was what I was writing at that age.
That's a perfect segue into our next thing, because one of the things that we're doing now is we're both writing our books and we're both getting into that writing lifestyle mentality. So let's talk about that a little bit. You identified as writing early on, so now you're coming full circle on that as well.
So I have published one book, which became an Amazon bestseller, and that was about military transitions.
What was the name of that book? Let's plug it so everybody can find
it. Heading Home. 15 Steps to a Successful Military Transition. And it's part of Itty Bitty Publishing that's done by Susie Pruden. And each of us have it's a book. They're very small, 15 steps for whatever subject that the person's writing about. And so that was it was a great experience for being my first solo book that I did. I've done chapters in other books about 3, 4 other books that I've put chapters in, which have most of them have become bestsellers as well, Amazon bestsellers. And so it was a great experience to kind of figure out, well, how do I craft a book? How do I put it together to get that thought process going? It was a subject, of course, I was very familiar with. And being able to do that, it showed me, okay, what other opportunities am I capable of doing? I've been carrying around notes for different stories for years. I'd always, when I moved with the military, I had this little briefcase of notes and everything that I just put in a car and keep with me, and I still have that. So I've outlined just all these different books that I want to do at some point. And one of the things I'm doing is kind of gathering all of that together and saying, well, how would I now, because since I've put down some of the notes, of course, life's experience has added to that. How can I, really craft this? Because to me, writing is a true art, and tapping into that creativity, everything that needs to be into that for me as a writer. I do blog now. I try to blog so many articles a year now. A lot of my blog articles are based on like business and leadership, career type information. And so being able to pull all of that together, it's something I really enjoy doing.
I came into writing so naively.
Mm-hmm.
When I started the book, I just had this, I had this vision in my mind of what it would be. And for whatever reason, I didn't stop to think about the fact that it takes work. Like, in order to be a writer, you have to write regularly, consistently. And writing a book is that's like level 10. You got to start on level 1. Like, the first thing you do is just start taking notes and getting in the habit of writing things down. And then you start with these little stories or little journal entries. And then ultimately you get to where you can produce blog posts and valuable, meaningful content. And then if you're lucky enough, like you, to get to a point where you get an outline and a structure to introduce the process of creating a book with that 15-step process to whatever it is that you want to do, that kind of gives you a little bit of a structure. And now what I'm learning as I'm really getting deep into the research and the documenting process and the footnotes and all. Holy cow, man. Like, writing is probably one of the hardest jobs around. I'm learning the hard way.
And I mean, if you look at not everybody goes to become a New York Times bestseller, although that is one of my goals in life, is to reach that someday. Most writers don't make a lot of money. So there's a true commitment and passion behind that, and being able to share that gift. And it does. Some of the best books took several years to write.
You're right. They pay nothing, man. Even like great literature. There's some great books I've read here over the past year or two, and the quantity sold just depresses me so much. It's so sad because it's such good stuff. There's such great content out there, and you see the numbers. And you've got the Tim Ferrisses of the world who are, these mega, the Ryan Holiday selling these huge volumes and whatnot, but there's so much more out there that's good stuff that's not getting the exposure, I feel like.
I agree. I do. there's so many books. There's something for every subject and everybody, and if you want it on audio now, or, people do videos about it, there's summaries out there. There's so many ways that you can tap into that world of literature. And so I know whatever you're thinking of, you can find a book on it.
So what would your advice be to somebody like me or somebody like us that's knee deep into that process? And you've already, I consider you you're much further down that writing path than I am. What advice would you have for me and others like me that are trying to do this same thing?
Understand why you want to do it. Because some people there's different reasons why you write a book. And I think you got to start and understand what it is. What is that reason for you? People will say everybody in certain professions should write a book. I don't go by all the rules or philosophies that people say that everybody should do this. Because if you don't want to do it and your heart's not there, it's going to show up in the work. It's going to show up in the writing. If you're using it as a calling card, as for your business, that's say a business card for you, which a lot of books are considered more like that business card because it tells your potential clients a little about you. Then consider being part of a book collaboration, as opposed to, and it's a great way to start putting a chapter in a book first, and you get to see your commitment to write that 2,000, 3,000 word chapter, and get to go through that experience as a group. That's a great way to get started. And you'll see a lot of those out there for the different topics and collaborations.
How did you find that opportunity? Because that's a great idea, and one that I've really never thought about, and I would like to look into doing something like that. How did that work out for you, or how would somebody like me go about trying to do something like that?
So there are several opportunities that come your way. One person actually found me, and her book was about America's top entrepreneurs. And I was very fortunate. I'm in the very beginning, like right next, I think I'm next to like Joe Vitale or something like that, so I'm like, it was pretty cool. But like she's got some Maya Angelou in there, a summary from when she interviewed her years ago.
Wow.
And it's a great, that one was a great project of the different types of people to be associated with. And she actually reached out to me. She had found me on LinkedIn, actually. And the others, I am part of the International Association for Professional Life Coaches. And she tries to, at least every year or so, publish a collaboration of some of her coaches that are part of that membership. And so I've gotten to participate with that a couple of times. She is so great to work with, Jeanette. How she puts it together, and she turns it around quickly. She's so good at what she does. It's just about us getting those chapters to her. I've done several with her. I'm working on a project with someone now where I'm not putting the chapter in, but I'm helping other people put their chapters in the book with him.
Helping them crystallize their content.
Yes. And that one is about women entrepreneurs and how having a business has impacted their life. And he's hoping to put that out later this year. So I'll be kind of doing social media posts about that. If someone's listening to this later, we're talking, fall of 2020, that will come out. And I've considered doing some of my own, where I kind of pull books together, different chapters together. But I think right now my main focus is really, I've got a lot of topics and things that I've started, and I really want to kind of pin them and do my own thing, because that's where I think I always knew my path would lead to writing. I mean, I will still be coaching, doing my group coaching, mastermind, and stuff like that. But I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head. You'll probably know, where he talks about running you can run until you're 100. I feel that way about writing. You can write until you're 100. Yeah, if you have to have someone recording your voice, or, it can just, that's how I just feel about it. There's always that, for me, that story I can think of, or be it fiction or nonfiction. And there's so many that I want to explore.
In that same vein, and you were talking about earlier, giving advice to us, is know the why that you want to write. So what's Carolyn's why?
For
writing this New York Times bestseller.
I am of a philosophy that we learn from each other. And there's a lot of pain and loneliness out there. And I know what I gained from the books I've read over time. There are people who have never traveled outside of their neighborhood. And that imagination and that creativity, by reading and knowing and understanding some things, is what has led to some of our greatest inventions, some of our greatest accomplishments. And being able to capture that on paper and inspire and motivate individuals to see past that. We limit ourselves so much, and we can be our own worst enemies. But sharing those stories and not just the good stuff. And, I don't want to just walk through everything's all roses in a book. I mean, the pain that comes with the journey, some of it's pretty rough, the things that people can go through. So sharing that along the way, that, yeah, that may have happened to you, but, you fall, but you get back up. Here's how it happens in this story for these characters, or here's the leadership principles that they learned. The soft skills and things that were not taught in school, and you learn from life's experience. So someone can pick up that book and they can read it and they can apply it, and it can make that difference, and it can help them along that journey and make life just a little bit better. That's why I'd want to write. That's the sweet spot for me.
Man, you got three things there I want to cover. That's good stuff. So I wholeheartedly agree. I think reading is such a beautiful activity because it does a couple of things that you brought up. I want to recap them. One, it provides an escape. Like,
yes.
About people who've never been outside their neighborhood, or never been outside their city, or never been on an airplane maybe, or something like that. Well, but if you got a library, if you can go there, you can escape. You can find what these things are like. You can mentally escape into these exotic destinations and have these exotic experiences there in your neighborhood, there in your own home. So that's one. Two. And then the second thing you brought up is the relatability. When you tell your story and somebody reads it, and they connect with it, they realize they're not alone. They realize that somebody else is having these same experiences. And the third thing I think is self-serving that you brought up, is that when we write these things out, when we write these books, it gives us closure. It allows us to uncompartmentalize all this stuff that we're trying to deal with or understand or make sense of or process, for lack of a better word, and we can get it out on paper, just flesh it all out, and then close the door on it. And then that allows us that freedom, that mental freedom, to then move on and to then grow and to get the next thing, whether it's a tragic story or even just a personal development thing. Like, I can't wait to get 8 Keys to Great done so I can move on to the next concept. Like, I need to get that thing crystallized, done, and packaged up and shipped. So now I can start working on the next thing that I've got on the list, So there's so many ways that reading is such a crucial element of our learning and development process.
Yeah, and you mentioned, so one of the things I also encourage people, writing is a way of healing, because sometimes people will write for themselves. It's personal, and they have no intention of having it published or going anywhere. But it is that healing process, and that's why a lot of people will journal, is to kind of help them walk through whatever is going on. And then, years later, they may decide, okay, yes, I can turn this into a story, but sometimes it's just for themselves.
Those make the best stories. The ones that you don't want to publish, the ones that you want to hide deep down in the crevice and nobody ever sees, that's the gold mine. And like you said, when you can put it out on paper and then let it sit for maybe a couple of years, let that healing process, do its thing, then you hopefully can get to a point where you're comfortable allowing other people to see that, because I guarantee you, man, that's the stuff that people want to read. That's the stuff that impacts them. It's the stuff you don't want to share, It's always the case. We talked briefly about some of the books early on that had an impact on you. Before we started recording, we were talking about all these books you were kind of taking some notes. Since you're prepared in that arena, let's talk about some of the books that you're into now, some of the stuff that you're utilizing in your coaching. Or
with the group coaching that I've been doing for a particular government agency, there's a couple of books that we had looked at. And one is Rising Above a Toxic Workplace. And that just gave a lot of real scenarios of, how some things were navigated through the workplace to solve different issues and problems, which wasn't always someone, say, staying with the company. That individual may have had to leave, but what was it? What did they do? What did they have to look at? What transitioned and changed for them to find a workplace environment that they really love to work in? And also books about how do you help the culture and create that environment where we can be judgmental without understanding or having empathy or understanding where someone's coming from. And that was another book. You have The Good Fight, which is about conflict, that, and it goes over the concept how conflict is good for you, how it can be healthy, but you have to learn how to navigate and work through it. And so that's an excellent book that we worked for that kind of that environment, the workplace. And then the other one is classic, Good to Great.
Yes.
And we talked about Good to Great and
Love that book.
what is the definition of a truly great organization. What are the concepts and qualities that leaders embrace in a great sustaining organization? I think that's the difference, where you see some of these places that then collapse under pressure, under crisis. But if it's a great company, they know what truly matters and how to rebound from those situations. You see this a lot with the churches, where people are focused so on the individual in the pulpit that they're, if that person leaves, they stop coming to church. They all shut down, because they associate it with the individual, not the true meaning and message of what church is. And so it's the same thing in a company, where you look at, if people are so focused on that individual, that person should be able to, when they leave, the principles and vision and mission that they're leaving, that can carry on. How do you do that? How do you understand that? Well, that's what Good to Great is about. And so those are three that I've recently worked on with the groups that I'm working with. And so we look at principles in trending movies, where we can find, like, people don't think of The Greatest Showman that came out, Hugh Jackman, and how I find leadership principles in that movie that can be taught. Very good ones that are in there.
Share one of those with me.
So part of that, I don't want to give away for those who haven't seen it, but there's also about acceptance in there.
It's out on DVD now. If they hadn't seen it by now, it's been tough for them.
So acceptance is big for me in that one, and that's why if you think about the Disney movies and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I do work with a lot of people who have disabilities of some sort, and when you think about some of the things they have to go through, you will be judged by the way you look. You're judged by the way you dress. You're judged by the way you talk. Just so many things that we pass judgment on without really looking at the true ability of the individual. If you were to not see someone and you see their qualifications, or you hear their voice, or, there's certain things that you would be attracted to, and then you see them and you're like, it's a whole different mind shift. Or if you were to see them first and then you pass that judgment, without even giving them a chance, you may have missed out on something great for you by walking by that person, by not really getting a chance to know them, And so when I see acceptance in that, I see, the relationships that aren't allowed to happen because you have to worry about what other people think, that we get so caught up in that we're so worried about what other people think that two people can't be together.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
Mm-hmm. And then, things are going to happen in life. And, I don't like to say the word failure, but it's the lessons that are learned. And how do you bounce back from that? Do you allow yourself to be defeated, or was it something that you truly didn't want in the first place? And you may have to take a different path to achieve that goal. So there's so much that you can, that's why, that's one. And we've talked about, we actually went back to a 1949 movie and talked about 12 O'Clock High, which has a military component to it, but there's so many leadership principles in there that we went through. So there's a lot of, movies and books and things that you can use that as those tools and looking in those lessons. That's why I always like Dr. Seuss. All his books had some kind of meaning behind it, but people don't, they get caught up in the, the pictures and the story. But he was a very interesting man who wrote these stories that ended up being great children's stories, but they had meaning in them. They did. One of my son's favorite growing up was Horton Hears Who. He really liked that one. And the Lorax was the other one about the environment. So,
Well, and you know what a big fan I am of Jordan Peterson.
yeah,
And one of the things that he has done a marvelous job at on YouTube in particular is taking a lot of these Disney movies and breaking down the archetypes behind them and the storyline behind how it's true throughout history, like how the principles in those movies hold true. And I think that's why the Disney movies in particular stand up so well over
they
time.
do.
You know what I mean? Like you can watch Cinderella, Rapunzel, those things, you know, what I mean, Snow White was in the 50s. I mean, you're talking literally like 70 some odd years ago.
Yes.
And they still hold up to this day. And it's just because the archetype, it holds up. There's value there. I love that.
Cinderella is one of my favorites.
Mhm.
Some of the principles behind that. Yes, Cinderella remains one of my favorites.
Well, that
And
kind of, and it all kind of goes back to, like, you know, how Jesus used those parables to teach. You know, you have these
yes,
ways of presenting tried and true things, but when you can present them in some type of a story or some type of a format people can relate to, that makes them easier to understand, or even if they don't understand them, to adopt them without necessarily understanding, and see the good that comes from them.
the most recent book that I read for myself outside of the work environment so was Personality Isn't Permanent by Dr.
Our
Benjamin
boy.
Hardy.
Oh,
Yes,
oh, so I guess we should officially give him a plug. That book officially was released yesterday, I believe.
yes,
It's out
it
on the
was.
market. If you get a chance, please support our brother Ben Hardy, and check out Personality Isn't Permanent. You can get them on Amazon or anywhere really right now. It's going to be all over the place. It's a big book.
It's actually made it to #1 on Amazon. It should be a New York Times bestseller. It's an excellent book, but that book has made me a better coach. It challenges some of the myths around personality assessments and different things that coaches are taught to do. And he gives such good, clear examples of the principles, and it walks through, and it's ranked in my top 10, probably my top 5 of books.
No kidding.
And
Awesome.
I've interviewed him on my podcast. I will be interviewing him again.
I've never seen anybody who can pull quotes and names quicker than he can, man. He does a great job at that. I really enjoy it. I've actually got to get my episode with him ready to pump out there now that the book's out. I guess we're all due to
Definitely.
give that big media blitz for him and take care of him.
When I was taking time to think about, what books have influenced me over time in my life, I think about a lot of the different authors, and I am kind of classic when I think of Hemingway and Shakespeare and Terry McMillan and Toni Morrison, and my all-time favorite poems are by D.H. Lawrence and Langston Hughes.
Nice.
And most people are sitting here probably like, don't even know who D.H. Lawrence is, or they hopefully
I don't know Langston Hughes. I do know D.H. Lawrence.
Oh, wow. He is very prominent as a writer, poet in the Black community. And his 2 poems one is called Dreams, and I believe the other one's Dreams Deferred. And when I went through thinking about this, I realized there's my top books all kind of connect together, and they have some similar meaning. I love The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, is one of my favorite authors as well. But they all have this meaning behind them about how you look and view life. And Langston Hughes, when he talks about it, if dreams die, it's like a broken winged bird that cannot fly. And that is how, when you give up, when you stop living and you're not walking in this authentic place, also taking into consideration how your actions impact other people. And that takes me back. I spent 1 year making sure I read the Bible cover to cover, all the way through from Genesis to Revelations.
Beautiful.
And the principles right there are even there about how you are choosing to live life, and how you still have to have this compassion for other people. And so I looked at The Last Lecture, another book I love.
I'm not familiar with that one. The Last Lecture?
Yes, and Knowing
check that
You, that's one I'd highly encourage you to read. It was written by, and I'll probably pronounce his last name wrong, Randy Pausch, I believe. It's P-A-U-S. It might be C-H on the end. But he wrote it for his children when he was dying from pancreatic cancer. And as a professor, when you're leaving, you give a last lecture. And so that was what this book was, became from that last lecture. And he left it for his children to be able to talk about life's journey. And some of the things that we can get so angry about that, we end up taking for granted when we know we're facing our last days. And he was encouraging you definitely not to live that way. And one of the coolest things in the book where he talks about someone had spilled something on his car, and it might have been a fairly new car, but he just turned the soda can up and poured it all over it, to ease that feeling. And I think that's also a similar thing that Dr. Benjamin Hardy talks about in his book, that how we respond to situations and how this whole journey of life and how we choose to live it. I think that's why I love and enjoy being a coach, is because you get to help people see that life they can live, the choices they make, that, sometimes they haven't really considered all the alternatives because they have these blinders on. My company, I named it Infinity Coaching. And I chose the word infinity because of all these possibilities that exist that we don't think about, we don't consider. And a lot of times it's because we've never been encouraged or told to look outside of our box that we may be placed in, that society may place us in. But we don't have to stay there. We can take that step out and kind of peek out in small little steps and see what else is there for us.
That's so true. You coach in the government arena and with the military, that having that as your background, it's not uncommon for people to make a career in that one spot, to put in that 20 to 30 years. And it's very easy for people to get stuck in a rut, to get kind of complacent with what they're at. And like what you were just talking about, like getting out there and doing something new and trying and failing and to have some new experiences and to live life essentially and craft that lifestyle like what I talk about so much. What's the biggest problem that you see with the people that you're coaching and in the situations that you're in? What is it do you think is the biggest problem holding people back or keeping them from being successful or realizing their potential?
So so we know I don't just work with people in the government. I work with, a different variety of people. So I get to see the different cultures. And I've actually kind of worked with people all over the world. That's been pretty cool, being able to work with people across the globe. And
you definitely get some cultural differences from that perspective for sure.
Yes, you do. And some in fact, some of the people that I'm working with now are of Asian descent, and they did not grow up in the States. And so they have a whole different perspective on different things that are happening now. And it's pretty interesting to work with and see it from a different viewpoint. But I think some of the problems I see are very, very kind of universal, where we are our own worst enemies at times. And we do get caught up in what other people think, what other people say, and we make choices based on that. I think we need to take in consideration of where we are in our life right now, because who I was in high school is not the same person who I am now. And 2 years from now, I may not be this same person or doing the same thing I am doing right now. We don't know. There's no kind of guarantees on that kind of thing. But we allow ourselves to let criticism, judgment, fear, doubt take over. Then we become our own, as I said, worst enemy. And we become stuck. And we don't want to try something different. And that holds us back. That holds us back from truly, to me, living. And when it comes to people and relationships and business, that's the two things I see as communication and relationships. Or two things I work a lot on with people, because a lot of situations can be, to me, diffused if you understand how to communicate with someone together. And it's about empathy and being able to put yourself in another person's shoes. Communication and relationships are where I see there's a lot of that's where a lot of some of the issues can come up. And I work a lot with people on those two topics: how to have dynamic relationships, how to kind of communicate and understand and speak in the same language. And I don't mean like literally in English, Chinese, or something like that, but I mean really taking time to listen.
The love languages. Like there's certain
Yes.
things that people that resonate with certain people, and if you can identify what those couple of things are, then you can cater to their needs so much more effectively.
You can. And, I think a lot of issues I've seen in the workplace have been based around that, where it becomes, people will put so much emotion into the situation that they're not truly hearing what the other person is saying. And so where the supervisor is really commending someone and saying, hey, I'm giving you this work because you're the person I know can handle it, they're seeing it differently as you just dumped this on me, because they're not really trying to see, wow. And that's actually something, a case I worked with was the individual didn't realize how much respect the employer had for them because of their ability to do certain things. And when that came clear, they were like, wow, really, me? So it was a great boost for their confidence and everything. And I mean, they just started being able to do so much more because they realized it was because the employer saw something in them.
Yeah, they identified their talents. And so much of that is the approach and how you go into it, and the way that you make people feel when you're trying to get them to do certain things or try to get their best efforts and whatnot. That empathetic approach and coming from that place of understanding is so critically important. Well, I love that you brought those two things up, because I think, to me, in my opinion, communication and relationships are the two areas that we as society, I feel like, have, I don't want to say degenerated, but really continue to struggle with. If you look at the rate of divorce, and single parenting, and so what is that? I mean, divorce at its core, it's like, that's two people learning how to live in the same space, essentially. Yeah, you go through the lovey-dovey stuff the first 2 years of honeymoon, and then you go through a period of understanding the other person, what their likes, dislikes are. And at some point you have to come to just a level of acceptance and patience and empathy to learn how to live with another human being, because we aren't easy to live with. I know I am not an easy person to deal with. I can be completely obnoxious and very hard to get along with, and hard-headed and all these other things. And the more we can recognize that in ourselves, it allows us that opportunity to then have more patience and understanding for the other.
Self-awareness is so vital. So when you think about empathy, self-awareness, because we have to understand who we are, and it's evolving. We change. I mean, people will get this concept that, I've got to be this person. And that's why I like the book Personality Isn't Permanent, because it busts that myth that we gotta be this person. If someone says you're an introvert, by golly, you're an introvert and you shouldn't be on stage. No, that is not the right answer. So being able to see that we evolve, we change, that happens in relationships where you might have married your high school sweetheart, but after 3 kids later and careers, that person has changed. Both have changed physically, mentally, emotionally, and hopefully you've learned to grow together. So it's really understanding it's more than just this physical piece, and how do you grow together and being able to communicate and talk to each other, but having that agreement that that's the way I'm going to get through this journey of life. Being able to understand, as people begin to have that self-awareness, that empathy, being a better communicator, to me, that life gets so much better, as you do those things. And that's why I love coaching, because we are able to help people walk through those pieces. I think, like you said, when it comes to, and marriage is one we think about a lot when it comes to communication, because it's just as you described it. But we also have come to this place where we'll quit very easily. We can walk away because that's the easiest thing to do at times. We don't put in the effort. So the other thing I like to talk about is commitment. Are you truly committed to whatever you're working on, be it your career path, which can change, the marriage, the relationships that you're in? And early on, the signs are there and you'll know, but we will stay in this stuck, miserable place. And it's almost sometimes like we will put this punishment on ourselves and think we have to stay here because somebody told us this is the way it's going to be. This is what we have to do. But you have to look and see, when you really look at it, are you not just hurting yourself, but the people around you too. And that's why the other word I would add in there is compassion. You have empathy, self-awareness, that communication, and compassion. Those are kind of those vital points.
Yeah. Well, and then just put in the work, like
Mm-hmm.
we're so quick. Again, going back to the divorce thing, it's like we're so quick to file a divorce because of whatever reason. And Lord knows I'm in that camp. But when you can shift your perspective and see it from more of a long haul, or maybe even like from a perspective of how you can serve and help others, and what your marriage represents to other people, like your children, for example, that when you can have a perspective on thinking what their needs are more so than, your particular feeling's been hurt at that particular time, it gives you a bigger, broader perspective. And I think that's always a wise thing to do. Have that bigger, long-term kind of perspective, goals, agendas, all that. So shifting gears just a little bit, you've been in this coaching arena for a while, and you've seen what I find very interesting is how coaching and personal development and some of the things have evolved, particularly over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the future holds for this field?
So with coaching, I think it's going to be and continue to be expand and grow. Because there is a difference between coaching and therapy. Therapy focuses a lot on past behavior, looking at that root, where coaching focuses on, to me, more of the future. What is it that you're trying to accomplish and create without having you dwell on that past? I mean, some people need to navigate and walk through the past.
Right.
So
there's some processing that needs to be done for traumatic events, things of that nature.
Yeah. So the coaching and therapy often can go hand in hand. I have worked with coach someone where the therapist and I kind of had a plan together on
That's
how
great.
we can best. We had to understand each other to see, here's what I'm doing, here's what you're doing. How do we work, coach and have therapy together? And it's been a marvelous process working with some of the therapists I've have the pleasure and honor to work with. But I think coaching really focuses on that goal that you're trying to accomplish and that future state that you're trying to create. In my focus as a coach is a career strategist, a leadership and life coach. And so as we kind of navigate through this new normal that's being created, a lot of people are finding themselves in a place they've never been in before. And coaching has been very beneficial in just, sometimes you'll meet with someone and it's just about they've got to get a lot out to find what that answer is that they're looking for. And they know it. They know it's there. But a coach is that trusted person that they can come to and say, okay, here, we have no agenda. We don't, a coach should not be telling you what you should do. But as they come to you, they'll think through it. It often said is that aha moment comes. And it's like, when that happens, it's
beautiful.
Right, it's
so fun to see. Well, and what I've found with a lot of this, and I'm just scratching the surface, but so much of it's just listening, and just like a little word or two here or there that allows them to kind of navigate their own path. Because, like you said, so much we all know. We know what our shortcomings are. We know we live with ourselves 24/7, man. Sometimes it just requires somebody listening, and just dropping a little hint here or there, or just a little question mark here or there, and that will be more than enough for us to have those aha moments. And I love when I'm talking to somebody and it's something just click, because they kind of stop and they pause, they don't say anything for a second. Well, it's like they just figured it out for themselves. I didn't do anything. I'm just sitting here, man. But to watch them have that little moment of recognition it's so rewarding for me and for us. I'm sitting on the other side.
I think coaches know how to ask the right questions, that trigger the thinking, that help them down that path. And sometimes it's like helping you reconnect with yourself, those things that you loved and you valued, and how out of alignment is your life. Being able to take some of those processes and, using those to get people to see those things. So I think that the coaching industry is going to continue to grow. But I'll say this for someone who's considering working with a coach, you'll hear some people say, I can coach anybody. But I don't agree with that, because there has to be a rapport. You have to have trust, and you have to have that, I don't want to say element of confidence, but you have to know that this is someone that I can reveal myself to and not hold back, because you've got to, I'll use that word committed again. You have to be committed to the coaching process and working through it and showing up.
So we talked about what's going to be big with coaching in the next 10 years and some of the things, how you think this is going to begin to play out. If everything goes according to plan for Carolyn, what does 10 years look like for you?
Oh, wow. It's funny. I ask that question of other people, but when, you're like one of the first people to really ask that to me in a long time. And I'm like, 10 years down the road, I honestly can't say where I'll be living or something like that, because I haven't figured that out yet.
That don't matter.
I will be writing a lot more. I will have published probably a couple of books by then. If not working on my New York Times bestseller, the one book that I'm writing with that goal in mind, I will be, if I haven't published it, I will be working on that one. I'll still be doing some coaching and some training, but I probably will have more of a writer's lifestyle then, which is, like you said, you don't make a lot of money as a writer, but I know that that's where I'm heading to, and that is my ultimate goal some way, and, day. And I could see that 10 years from now, sitting in like the cafes and, not these franchise places, but these small cafes that have been able to survive and that have this story behind them, where you could sit there and you're just kind of writing. I've always kind of felt that kind of backpack, go here and kind of sit there and spend the day writing and people watching. And that
sounds like Europe, like Paris or something to me in my mind.
Paris is one of my favorite places. And I have not come to terms that when I envision it, I see it somewhere in Europe or so.
Interesting.
But I haven't come to terms with that yet.
I was gonna say that's that's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, for me, the struggle with that for me is there's things I've got to let go of to create that life for myself. And so that's part of my kind of plan right now, is to create that writer's lifestyle, to create that life. Again, I'll still be doing some coaching. I think I'll do that always, because those are the type of things that you could do, well into years to come.
Forever, in perpetuity.
But I know writing will become more a part of my life. Right now, I kind of do more of the blogging and, kind of small chapters and things. But as each kind of month goes by, I'm closer to closer where I start putting down, typing more notes. Or sometimes I feel very blessed that I can wake up in the morning and outline an entire book. And it's like, oh, wow, how'd that happen? And I've got to get it on paper right away, because I have a notepad right there and I'm ready, and I just start writing and writing and writing. And then it's like, almost like you're in a trance. It's like, boom, wow, how did I do that?
Yeah, we had talked about that before. And I think that goes back to the gift. You hear about songwriters and musicians where they feel that they're a conduit for the information to just flow through them. What struck me was when you told me that you would wake up in the middle of the night with these little episodes where you would just have something to write, and that's why you kept that pad there. And that was such a revelatory moment for me. Like, man, that's the gift. I mean, if that's happening on a consistent basis, that's the gift. That's something you can't plant that. So you can't that doesn't just happen. That's something that, it's a miracle. The way I look at it, that's the gift that God gave you that says, okay, here's your path in life. And I think a lot of us are not fortunate enough to have that or to know what that is. And for you to know that, man, that's pretty remarkable.
As a coach, I coach myself through this. It's like that. It can also be one of those things that you're afraid of, like has some kind of fear attached to it.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. It's terrifying.
Right. You're like,
that's also how you know it's right. When it's terrifying, it's absolutely making you as uncomfortable as you could possibly be. That's the right track. That's like me with doing these videos, man, these Facebook Lives. I hate it and I feel totally uncomfortable. And that's how I know it's right. because of how uncomfortable it makes me. So, um, no, I think it's beautiful. It's just another example of how you've been able to identify your gift, man. I think that's really cool. So I'm going to put you on the spot for a little bit. Everybody knows Carolyn as this professional coach. You've got this, I won't say facade because it's all legit. I mean, you've been doing this for decades, and people come to you out of the woodwork for your advice, for your counsel, and for your leadership. So what's something that Carolyn is struggling with?
So I would say it's holding on to stuff. It's hard for me to let go of like things. Like I said, if you were to, I've talked to you about this before a couple times where I have over 1,000 books. And I know I need to kind of let go of some of those and kind of give them away that someone else can be blessed by them. And then I have, all of, like I said, I have papers that I've kind of lugged around for years and stuff. And I think the challenge becomes is by having the stuff is that it blocks my creativity. It doesn't allow me to fully tap into that piece that I'm talking about, and I don't believe I fully will until I'm able to let go. And once I do, that the words will truly flow,
That's fascinating because you kept those things originally because you felt like it would help you to do that.
Well, see, it's much more than just those papers.
Oh, okay. So that's a little deeper than that.
I probably have, some, but what's funny is as I'm going through and finding some of them, the words I wrote, say, 10 years ago are similar to what I'm writing now. So it's like, oh my God, these ideals have always been there for me. Now I just got to do it. I got to make it happen.
Yeah.
Because it's clearer now. But there's a lot of things like if I want this writer's life, then it's part of that creating and being able to let go of things. I like to put it this way, things that no longer add value or serve you, because those things can drain you. And so part of my 2020 plan and into 2021 is learning more about this minimalistic lifestyle. And and I think as you get older too, you can find out, well, I don't need as much stuff. I don't need all the clothes, or I don't need all these things. But then you got to let go of them, and it's part of accepting where you are in life too. I'm not going to be as that high school skinny girl anymore. That's done. Okay, be okay with those things, embracing who you are, appreciating yourself, loving it, and then being able to let go of those things. So for me, as my person, who I am, that's the biggest thing I struggle with, is being able to kind of let go with some of those things. And that was actually part of my goal this year, because it's like releasing these things from you.
Yeah, it's almost like when you declutter your life, it allows you to also kind of declutter your mind a little bit.
Yes.
It frees yourself up for that creative process to flow. That makes perfect sense to me.
I can't wait to write the articles that I'm going to be writing about it. One of the things I'm working on is online courses that I'm working on and creating. And part of them definitely are about communication and relationships, because those are my, it's this whole thing about stress, communication, relationships, and how that all ties together. And then also, as I go through this, documenting this whole journey of going more to a minimalistic lifestyle, not that I'm, the extreme person who's, I'm going to get rid of everything. No, I'm not going that far. But that whole connection, that mind, organization, everything, connection, I want to share that with people to see, I'm in a great place now, but I know it can be even better.
Yeah.
And sure. How do you create that?
Well, and documenting that process allows you to be able to share that with other people. And then it goes back to what we were talking about before, just with all the writing, it allows that relatability. And when somebody can see Carolyn, who's like this icon, or that, that they have this ideal, if you will, and see, okay, well, here's something that she's struggling with, here's a flaw that she's working through, or whatever it is, it makes it real. It makes it relatable. People, because people don't relate to that perfect image, that's the movie star. That's the unattainable. It doesn't relate. That's why I'm always very forthcoming with all the blunders that I make. Not that I know what I'm doing with any of this stuff, or that anybody looks to me for an example for anything. But when you can, hey, here's a screw up I made and I learned something from it, and that provide value to somebody else so they don't screw up quite as bad, then hey, mission accomplished.
Yeah, and I think we share too much of the good stuff. And that's why I want a lot of the writing I do will share and talk about pain. That's what people need to see, that you can heal from.
Seeing the journey.
Faith is strong. And I think that's one of the things that I have relied on. I was talking about that with someone yesterday. When you look back and you see, in fact, it might have been you I was talking to when I was talking about, getting through this whole journey and how do you get through it? How do you get there? For me, a lot of my foundation was that, in the darkest times, what do you turn to? How do you get through it? Yeah. And we don't like to talk about the darkness, but I found, and that was one of the things I did get complimented on as a coach, was I can meet somebody in their darkness and not get myself stuck there with them. And that's hard at times for people to do. How do you do that? How do you walk someone through that? But you've got to, I can't think of the name of the movie, but it was all about the different emotions. It was a Pixar movie, I believe. And you talk about,
where each emotion was their own little emoji kind of thing. Like,
yes, it talks about how all emotions are important. The tears, the joy, and being able to
all
allow
valid.
yourself. Yes, give yourself that time when you need to grieve, and I don't mean just grief when it comes to death. I am pretty open that single parent raising my son, that I did that, and when there are moments you go through and you think about that, people they want to kind of make it seem like, oh, everything's good, but it's not. You have moments when you're wondering and questioning and, things you go through. And you have to allow yourself those times to go through the different emotions. I encourage people, if you got to get the tears out, get them out. But it's when you stay stuck in that place,
right,
that you need to be able to either get the help to get out of there or know how to get yourself out of it yourself.
Well, and I think it's important to know that grief, sorrow, anger, all those emotions are part of the cycle. You can't have the happiness, you can't have the joy, you can't have the fulfillment without going through some of the negatives too. It's the whole yin and yang principle. I mean, think about, like, it's just the idea of eating a steak dinner every day. Yeah, or eating a filet mignon. Filet is the best cut of meat. It's a delicious steak and it's wonderful, and you have it and you can't beat it. But eat it for a month straight. Eat it for a month straight, you're gonna be looking for a hot dog. Because you need that change, you need that variety, you need that ebb and flow to work both ways. So I totally get it. It makes perfect sense to me. I'm getting invaded by my little one here, so we're going to have to start winding this thing down. Speaking of little ones, we would be remiss if we didn't bring up your pride and joy. So give a shout out to your boy and all that good stuff.
And so he recently turned 19. So I am very, I'm one of those proud moms on the different accomplishments I made. And I will say it's because it's known. In high school, he was quite, very large, a large person. And he, over time, on his own, lost 100 pounds. He looks awesome.
Yeah, now he looks like the statue of David or whatever it is now.
He's a beautiful smile. He's a great kid. But he did that with no those diet gimmicks and remedies and stuff. He put the hard work in. He changed his diet. He, went to the gym. He did this. And I mean, at such a young age, to make such a commitment to totally transform his body, his health, everything. He was, high blood pressure, all of that. He is in such good, healthy shape now. And he did that without all of the gimmicks and, things you see. He did this study and he figured out what was best for him. And he continues to develop that. And he looks great. So he, had graduated from high school last year. He's in school and college studying.
Well, I was going to say, not only did he have that physical transformation, but he's also had huge strides in the mental and emotional. I mean, becoming a man, it's like, yeah.
Yes.
He's had a good example to go by. So that's putting those values in place early on.
They listen to you. I think you don't realize how much our kids listen to you, because he's got to see me and hear me doing the coaching. And you can hear that he picks up some of the terms or different things.
It can't help but rub off on him.
Training.
Yeah.
I used to make him have to, if I was going to give a training somewhere, it's like, all right, I want you just to listen to me go through this real quick and stuff. But you don't think about, as he's listening, that it's sinking in. I'm like, I just needed a person in front of me to sit down and kind of go through it, because it might have been a new presentation I wrote I hadn't done before.
Right.
But you don't think that they're actually absorbing some of this. And you see it, he's got to, see me work in the military. And I think, he's a military kid. He traveled to different places with me. So he got to not have to stay in his neighborhood. He got to leave.
Have some of those experiences, those life experiences.
He participated in my business. He created some of the graphics for me. And so he got to experience that as well. So I am, very proud of the person that he's becoming. Like I said, it wasn't always easy. I don't want to paint this perfect road.
He's still a teenager.
Right. We had our moments. And again,
for sure.
How do you navigate through some of those things? And I do, we talked about sharing some of those stories. And he actually wrote some articles one time about this whole thing of how we got our dogs, and how they actually were for him, but they end up being mine, because, he wrote about how, as a parent, you really need to take in consideration, is your child really going to do these things and stuff? And he did write it and stuff, and was very honest about it. It was pretty cool.
I love it. That's so great.
But I might share them on my blog one day.
You definitely should do that, for sure. For sure. Well, hey, listen, we're going to have to wrap it up. I do want to take a moment to say, he was absorbing all that content that you were producing and that you were practicing. But I think more than that, what he was absorbing was your process, your example. And I talk about it before, nobody really cares what your opinion is. And especially your teenager. When you tell them something, they automatically assume that it's wrong. But what always holds true and what cannot be denied is the example. Mm-hmm. When you're making that good example, they're still going to pretend like they ignore you. They're still going to think you're an idiot, you're wrong, whatever. But that example sticks with them, man. That the way that you carry yourself day in and day out, the way that you were preparing for those presentations, that's what left the impression. That's what's going to stick with him 20 years from now, when he's doing the exact same thing and he's exhibiting the exact same kind of behaviors, man. And if we can do just a little bit of that, man, made in the shade. But
prayerfully so. Prayerfully so. A lot of prayer.
Before we wrap up, let everybody know where they can find you, how they can contact you for coaching, social media. And I also, as you do that, I want to give everyone an opportunity to mention any charity or organization that they're involved with that they want to promote.
All right. So if you go to, I like to call this my connection hub. And if you go to Carolyn Owens 360.com, there you will find my website link, my social media links, everything that you need to connect with me. My podcast is called Let's Coach with Carolyn, and you can find that on whatever your favorite listening platform is. We put out on average 2 to 3 episodes a week, and it is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes. I mean, you can pretty much find this podcast everywhere.
So go to every one of those and subscribe, please.
Yes, I even got
do us all a favor.
Please. And if you like it, definitely leave a review. But I have a lot of fun with the podcast, and I do have. If you look at Let's Coach with Carolyn, it's been around long enough that you just type it in Google, it comes up. Yeah. And it's also, we've got a dedicated now Instagram page. It's fairly new. Let's Coach with Carolyn. You can find it there, and then you'll see information about all our guests. I like to share some of their quotes and things they're doing and stuff.
Great content on that Instagram page, by the way.
Yes, and then you also see my other one there, Carolyn R. Owens. But Let's Coach with Carolyn is where the podcast is. So you can find me there. And again, Carolyn360.com is where you'll find the link to my website. It's cool that everything is pretty much there.
I need to do that.
I love that connection hub. And some of the things that you'll see upcoming for me are the online courses, my group coaching that anyone will be able to be a part of, that I encourage you to check out. And then my blog, you'll see the link to my blog on that connection hub as well. The charity that I recently committed to this year is called Unstoppable You Ministries, and it's led by Jennifer Foxworthy. I'll actually be interviewing her on my show, and she focuses on domestic abuse, human trafficking, homelessness. She's also a veteran, retired Navy as well, and she has a very interesting background as a female who was part of an air crew and was one of the first women to fulfill that role. So that was pretty, she's
cool.
A great person with some of the work and things that she's doing. And she is doing remarkable things for the homelessness, human trafficking. It's amazing. And then the second charity I support is the Complete Player Charity, TCP, and they're about leadership and empowerment of youth. And if you look up TCP Charity, it's run by Andy Schindling. I've also interviewed him on the show as well. And I'd say he had to kind of convert with the whole COVID-19 thing to be able to bring this online. But when you see what the kids stepped up and did, it was amazing to how they still pulled that together. But he works with the local middle schools and high schools with a leadership program, as well as he has a baseball program where he teaches leadership principles throughout the summer. So it's Unstoppable You Ministries.
I was going to ask if it was sports related.
Yes, the Complete Player Charity. It's baseball-based kind of thing.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Those are two great organizations. That's amazing. That's awesome. Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that we went through a few things to get to this point, but I really am grateful for your time and for the opportunity and for the example that you're doing, not just for Dewan, but for all of us. They're always watching, man. They're always watching. And so when you can, be that kind of example to look to, that icon, it's very helpful to the rest of us. So thank you. Really
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll look forward to doing it again. Part 2 coming soon, right?
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening. So, what'd you think? What did I miss? Was there a topic you wish we had covered? Was there an area of discussion you want to know more about? Or was the whole thing just too long? Please send us your questions and feedback on social media to @extraordinarypodcast or check out our website, extraordinarypodcast.net. Subscribe there for all the latest episodes, blog posts, and more. And if you're tired of living the same old ordinary life, shoot me an email, nate@extraordinarypodcast.net, and I will send you your own customizable blueprint that will walk you through step by step how to create your own extraordinary life. And if you or someone you know already fits the profile, you can submit a request to be interviewed on the website as well. Finally, if you like what you heard or learned today, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and follow the Extraordinary Podcast on all your favorite platforms like YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you feel inspired, show your support for the show by donating through Patreon. It is through this financial support that we are able to continue to bring to life ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Thank you for your support, and most of all, just being you. This is Nate G, and we'll see you next week.